All right, folks, so this time we want to talk a little bit about feints. F-E-I-N-T, not F-A-I-N-T. And this is something I'd have to credit Greg for because he brought that up recently. It was kind of an eye-opener because it changed the way I think about these things. So generally what a feint is a pretend attack, the way people normally understand it. So in the sense that if I act as if I'm going to strike him here, but then I do something else. But there are a few problems with that kind of mindset.
A couple issues I've noticed when it comes to feints being thrown in combat is that it tends to leave you more vulnerable than it does create openings. When you're fighting against very new fighters, so we're talking maybe yearlings, people that aren't experienced with fencing, they tend to have a mentality because of practicing and drilling that it's your turn to attack and then their turn to attack and vice versa. So if we're in a situation with a novice fighter, if I throw a feint with the intent of scooping to say his arm afterwards, even if there's no impact here, this person's going to take that as the cue to fire their attack. And what we end up with here is a situation in which we're going to double. We don't want this. We want to have clean engagements, and this becomes problematic. And against really experienced people, if you start looking at single tempo counters, this becomes problematic again. If I'm throwing an attack that doesn't have any intent to strike my opponent's throwing, say, like a Zornhau or a Zwerkau or something like that, right? If I come to here with the intent of moving around, if this is a committed counter stroke or a single tempo counter to cut through my cut, me going anywhere else with this is just going to leave myself vulnerable, right? When we cut to cross the line. And when we engage in a fashion that keeps us safe with our attack. If we give those up, and this happens especially when we're feinting, we make ourselves really vulnerable when we're fighting.
Also, another common issue is if somebody is very good at defending in an aggressive way, or in a threatening way, I should say. So let's say, for example, you throw an undercut. So and instead of parrying it all the way out here, let's say maybe you do it again, and I put the point on. Now, if he does not follow through with this, and if he just pretends, he does then moves over, the point is right here. So he can run into the point if he does an actual feint. A better way of doing that is, rather than pretending to do an action and then do a different one, is changing your intent based on what the opponent is doing. So I'm going to throw this as an actual cut that will connect if he doesn't do anything. So if he does raise up, and I see that now is the time to do something else, and I don't even have to make contact here. If I see this early enough, as soon as he rises up, I can change over to another quadrant. But the important thing here is that I do it as a response to what he's doing. If he just stands there and I just do this anyway, I lose, because then I can immediately see what's going on. Whereas if I throw it as if I mean it, and he doesn't react, boom, this is going to hit him.
The difference is in intention. All right, this is the big thing here. My intent on my cut shouldn't be to simply create an opening. If this is where the feint gets kind of fuzzy, right? If my only intent with this action is to draw him up into this quadrant so that I can attack the other arm, right? This becomes problematic. This becomes really problematic when my opponent simply creates space instead of parrying, right? Because now I'm into this rote action and I'm not threatening him at all.
I mean, you are in this case, but...
Well, I put you on point, yeah, but I'm not threatening you with the cut.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and you have the moment after you step back to initiate some kind of additional parrying.
And that's generally what people would do. They wouldn't normally just step back, but step back and cut, say.
Precisely, right? What I need to do instead is I need to be firing this attack in such a fashion that if all he's going to do is create a little bit of space...
This still hits me.
Right? My intent is to cut him in the head until that becomes unavailable. This is precisely what he was talking about earlier, right? I fire, this raises up. Once this is no longer available, I'll change my attack. I'll move to a different quadrant, I'll change my intent.
So from the outside, the final effect is the same. He starts one attack and then he turns it into something else. But the mindset is different, and this is what I find where it really clicked.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with it is that the language is so loaded. People hear the term feint, they think about Dungeons and Dragons or different video games where there's a feint ability, and the whole concept and the way it's described is a deceptive action to draw your opponent into making a mistake for you to capitalize on. And it's that change of intent that I think is the big thing. This is all what you've been saying. And you see this in novice fighters where they realize that they can bait people into making mistakes, and now it just all starts becoming feints. Or their opening attack is always a feint. I know this happened to me in my first year of fighting. I figured out what feints were, or I thought I did, and had this giant light bulb moment and started fighting, and I started winning a bunch of fights, and everybody got wise to me, and I started losing everything. Because they knew that that first cut I threw was always gonna be non-committal, always. And the minute that happens, he's gonna start executing chasings really, really well, right? So I fire here to draw you into this quadrant. You rise up, sure, but now when I leave this quadrant, you're already cutting here, right? You lose the fight.
What you can do if you want to cause a particular reaction from your opponent is something that's not really a feint. It may look somewhat similar, but it's a different concept. So let's say Greg is one of those people who just hang out in high guard and cut down no matter what I do. Like I come in, he cuts down. I do just about anything, he cuts down. So what I could do is, if I already know that, or if I have a suspicion that this might be what happens, I can throw an attack that's actually not threatening him, but that leads to a follow-up. So I do an undercut that ends in the guard, in bow. So because I know that he cuts down, I can do this, and then I can move in, or I can do whatever else I want, really. So this is something where you cause a particular action that you anticipate, and then you follow up with something else. So this undercut here is not going to do anything because it's out of measure. But I do this to protect myself and to provoke a response. But it's different because in this case I'm actually protecting myself. Whereas if I just do this non-committal thing, this is not doing anything to protect me. Because if I wanted to displace a cut, I'd have to actually follow through and cross the line and do a number of things. If I just do this is doing absolutely nothing. I leave myself wide open. Okay, so thanks, Greg, and I hope you found this educational. Thanks for watching.